Hello everyone, I am the Sleepy Storyteller and today I will share with you stories before you fall asleep. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below where you are watching this video. We start right now. The world is full of various gourmets, the world is full of various dishes. Among them, there is one caste that no one likes, cannibals. Among cannibals, there are also many gourmets, as well as various dishes. I prefer babies. Their soft and fresh meat, not yet spoiled by the environment, aromatic, still full of juice. Yes, eating the flesh of children who have just or recently given birth is a heavenly pleasure. That's just the way I am, a gourmet among cannibals. My food rations are easy enough to get, if you're careful, of course. You have to act quickly and stealthily. Some young mother is distracted for a couple of minutes, you have to react quickly, otherwise you might be left without lunch. I don't eat regular human food, it makes me sick. I have to steal about 3 babies a day. When I get home, I kill them, dismember them, pack them up and diligently put all the meat in the refrigerator. Dogs gnaw the bones. They make quick work of such small stuff. I have tried many times to find like-minded people, but my taste preferences were considered very strange even among my own. Sitting for hours in special forums, many people wrote to me that there is no meat at all in babies, the taste is rather bland. After all, it is logical, a person has just been born, has not yet formed, has not accumulated the necessary elements, is not properly fed. Would you eat a newborn lamb? Of course not. Although I would not be surprised if there is a daredevil who wants to try it. It will be a surprise to me if someone understands the entire wonderful taste of meat of a creature that has just recently been born. You just have to bite off, chew it properly, so that all the taste buds pass through the fibers of the meat, the juice spreads throughout the oral cavity, combines with the sauce and spices, exquisite taste, perfect, nothing compares to this. Maybe I should tell you something from my practice. I have a couple of stories, once you listen to them, your blood will run cold, most likely. This is what they usually say when telling scary stories around a campfire. There is no exact schedule for my hunt. For me, stealing a baby is like going to the store for ordinary people. It happened that after a hard day, I could not fall asleep. No matter how hard I tried, from tea to ASMR, I could not sleep. Night was just falling, when a brilliant idea came to my mind, to take a walk. Then I understood those people who catch aesthetic pleasure on autumn evenings. A light cool breeze, which makes it pleasant to breathe. Freshness and a faint scent of leaves that crunch melodically underfoot. Autumn, it is beautiful. I have never enjoyed a walk before, an unusual experience for me. I am not one of those who particularly like to organize such walks. At least until that moment, I didn't even immediately notice the baby's cry. I was staring at the half-naked trees, forgetting about the real world. When the crying became closer and louder, I came out of my euphoria. I became interested in what delicious baby was crying. I was able to make out the silhouette of a mother under a lonely street lamp. She was sitting on an old bench, trying to calm her child. I watched her from the darkness, examining the baby. He was heavy, about 5 or 7 months old. Not a bad piglet. Adrenaline was boiling inside me. I wanted to tear the baby out of the mother's hands, but I had to act carefully. Without prying eyes, without harming the child himself. Oh, my grief. The girl said, standing up, she headed out of the alley. Time to act. I hid in the shadows, without making any unnecessary noise. There was no one around, that's good. I'm always lucky in hunting. I got closer and closer to her until I touched her thin neck. With deft movements of my hands I twist it, she falls dead. The baby cries loudly. It seems to be whole. I carefully take him in my arms, rocking him. He looks at me with wet eyes, stretches his little hands to me, not even suspecting that he will be cut up and used for meat. First, you need to calm him down. If the pig was afraid of being butchered, the meat will not be very tasty. Try to make him fall asleep, and then you can strangle him. I do the strangulation with a pillow. Only after that can you start butchering. First the head, then the limbs, take out all the entrails, you can leave the heart, lungs and liver, I throw everything else to the stray dogs. I use the meatier pieces for mince. I agree, you can take a little meat from a baby to make a reserve, you will need to take about 5 babies a day from their mothers, but for the sake of tasty meat I will do anything. I'll tell you another story that happened to me recently. In broad daylight, I alarmed almost the entire city with my hunting, and it was funny for me to watch all of this. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, I decided to walk around the mall and buy myself something. I bought myself some clothes, a couple more little things, and headed for the mall exit. While I was shopping, I noticed a few delicious babies. I didn't want to risk it, it was a mall after all. It's good that I have a good memory for faces, I remembered my parents' appearance. But all that faded when I saw him, chubby. Big. About a year old. Looks like a pretty tasty baby, I forgot about others, I only needed him, it happened in a parking lot. Usually it is also quite crowded, but you can catch a moment when there are no strangers watching. Only a miracle could have saved me here. Perhaps someone decided to help me by making it so that there were not so many people in the parking lot. My mother. If I understood correctly, that the lady who looked like a socialite was nearby, but she was so engrossed in a conversation with another lady that she would hardly have noticed if they had tried to steal even her car. I tried not to give myself away, just pretending to pass by. Meanwhile, the ladies had gone somewhere. The child remained in the stroller, apparently, the unfortunate mother had forgotten about him during the conversation. Her stupidity played into my hands. Human stupidity has no limits. While no one was there, I picked up the baby as quickly and carefully as possible. He didn't even cry, he opened his eyes and smiled, holding out his little hands. He walked away with wide strides. As soon as I left the parking lot, a piercing scream of that mother was heard. It didn't sound like a normal human scream, but rather like a siren. Such a commotion arose, people ran to the source of the noise, like a herd of sheep. There was a good hubbub then. I walked home, despite the considerable distance. At least I wouldn't be discovered that way, they would think that a father with a 1-year-old child was returning home after shopping. Only later did I find out, when I read in the newspaper, that I had stolen a baby from some retired top model. They made quite a fuss, the police looked in on almost everyone, asking about suspicious individuals with a child in their arms. They even stopped by to see me. Did I mention the miracle? Yes, it was a miracle that saved me. Someone from above gave me their blessing. I had fun then, it's still funny to remember. I kept the meat and entrails of that baby for a long time, until my birthday. It was a great holiday dinner, and all for me alone. I can go on and on about my adventures, you'll get tired of listening. I'm a little tired myself, a little hungry. You can consider me the most immoral bastard, even among my colleagues in the shop. I am what I am. I am what I eat. This is how your Lord God created me. I'll tell you a secret, there are still many nasty people like me on earth. They just don't talk about it. And you don't even suspect when you're standing at the ticket office, at the bus stop, riding the bus, that you can sit literally right next to someone like me. Now I'll go and eat after all. The next story, I could barely open my eyes, mentally fighting sleep. To be honest, I didn't really want to get up. I looked at the digital clock, trying to see the time. 5:48, it's almost 10 to 6, and I'm already awake. Why is that? Today is a day off, I don't have to go anywhere, but my body still made me wake up so early. I kind of wanted to sleep, and kind of didn't. I sighed heavily and looked at the window. Or rather, at the small gap between the curtains. It was still pitch dark. It was early December. The snow hadn't fallen properly, and the weather was only pleasant with frost. The frost sat so beautifully on the trees. One tree was so covered that it looked like a cocoon. Or was it just me? I smiled slightly at the thought. It was funny, but this tree looked like a human head. As if an avant-garde artist had decided to paint a portrait of a person, a large, awkward head on a very thin and small neck. Nature is the best artist, and no matter how talented a person is, he cannot surpass the beauty of nature. I felt sleepy. I woke up again with difficulty. I looked at the clock again, 6:24, didn't get enough sleep. Oh, my damn body. I still want to sleep, just get a good night's sleep on my day off, and you're making me get up. Well, no, I'm not getting out of my warm bed. I'll lie there as long as I personally need to, until I myself understand that it's time. I turned my attention to the window again. It seemed to me again, but the tree that was covered with frost, like a cocoon, acquired a human outline. The light from the lanterns was weak, plus the darkness, most likely, it was a play of light and shadow. In addition, my sleepy consciousness was playing tricks. Yes, nature is the best artist. I need to get some more sleep. I don't know how long I lay there, but I couldn't sleep a wink. I was too lazy to look at the clock, obviously not for long. Well, I'll just lie there and look out the window until I get bored. Wait, now I clearly see a human face on that tree. Either angry or offended. An incomprehensible emotion, but clearly negative. Now you can't write it off to the play of light and shadow or drowsiness. It really was a head. Did you get sleep paralysis? No, I can move. Then what is it? The face looks straight at me, as if it knows I'm watching it. I closed my eyes, pretended to sleep. I really was trying to sleep. I tossed and turned, no matter what comfortable position I took, sleep still wouldn't come. A strong wind blew outside the window. So warm that it became hot for a moment. Opening my eyes, I saw that very face standing close to the window, blowing that very warm wind. It looked straight into the crack, noticing that I was no longer sleeping. At one point, the wall crumbled, and an incredibly large hand appeared in the room. Grabbing me, it brought the head to that face's mouth. Instantly I was plunged into a sticky darkness from which there was no escape. The next story, the storm raged against the old mansion like a feral beast, its claws of wind and rain raking the weathered stones. Nestled deep in the woods, the Merrow house had stood for centuries, its history woven with whispered tales of madness, betrayal, and blood. Tonight, the house seemed alive, groaning and creaking under the assault, as if protesting the darkness encroaching within. Evelyn tightened her shawl around her shoulders as she lit a candle in the drawing room. She had come to Merrow House reluctantly, summoned by the will of her estranged uncle, Horace. The letter had been cryptic, urging her to claim her inheritance before it was too late. She had arrived just as the storm broke. The forest path twisting and treacherous, guiding her to the house like a predator leading prey. The interior was a mausoleum of shadows and dust. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow her every move. Evelyn placed the candle on a table, its flickering light casting eerie shapes that danced across the cracked wallpaper. The will, sealed in an envelope marked with an ornate wax crest, lay unopened beside her. The lawyer who had handed it to her had refused to enter the house, his demeanor as pale as the lightning flashing outside. she broke the seal. The parchment within was brittle, the ink faded but legible, to my dearest Evelyn. By the time you read this, I will have departed this wretched world. The Marrow name, once proud, has been cursed by our deeds. The house. It hungers. You must find the key and end its torment. Do not linger once the task is done. Burn the house and leave, for your life and soul depend on it. Forgive me for what I have burdened you with. You are the last hope. A crash of thunder rattled the windows, and Evelyn's breath caught as the candle sputtered. Her uncle's words were the ravings of a madman, yet unease coiled in her stomach. The house felt aware, its silence not of peace but of watchfulness. Resolving to leave as soon as the storm allowed, she folded the will and placed it back on the table. But something caught her eye. A glint of metal embedded in the fireplace's stonework. She approached cautiously, her pulse quickening. It was a key, ornate and ancient, its surface etched with cryptic symbols. She pulled it free, and as she did, the air in the room grew heavy, oppressive. The portraits seemed to lean forward, their expressions twisting with malevolence. A low, guttural whisper echoed through the room. It wasn't her imagination. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a symphony of despair that chilled her to the bone. Evelyn. Her name slithered through the air like a serpent. She backed away, clutching the key, her eyes darting around the room. The shadows deepened, swallowing the light. The house groaned, a sound that resonated like a monstrous heartbeat. Who's there? She demanded, her voice trembling. The only reply was a cold, hollow laugh, driven by both terror and curiosity. Evelyn fled the room and ascended the grand staircase, the key clutched tightly in her hand. The hallway above was a labyrinth of doors, each marked with strange carvings. She tried to make sense of them, but her thoughts were clouded by the growing sense of being watched. One door, larger and more ornate than the rest, drew her like a moth to flame. The key seemed to vibrate in her hand as she approached. The carvings on the door matched those on the key, an intricate language she couldn't comprehend. She hesitated, but the whispering returned, more insistent now. Open it, Evelyn. Free us. The words filled her head, drowning her reason. Her fingers trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in a sickly green glow. At its center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a book bound in what appeared to be human skin. The whispers became a cacophony as she approached. The book pulsed, as if alive, its pages fluttering despite the still air. Against her better judgment, Evelyn reached out and opened it. The inked words writhed and shifted, forming sentences before her eyes. The house feeds. Blood binds. Only sacrifice will sate its hunger. The door slammed shut behind her, and the room plunged into chaos. Shadows peeled from the walls, coalescing into monstrous shapes. Evelyn screamed as the specters surrounded her, their faces twisted masks of agony and rage. You cannot escape, they intoned. You must choose, flee and doom the world, or stay and sate the hunger. Evelyn's mind reeled. The book's pages turned on their own, revealing an illustration of a knife and a ritual circle. She realized the symbols matched those etched into the floor around the pedestal. Despair washed over her. Her uncle hadn't been mad, he had been desperate. I can't, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You must, the shadows demanded. One specter, more solid than the others, stepped forward. It bore the face of her uncle, his eyes filled with sorrow. Forgive me, Evelyn, he said. It was always meant to be you. He extended his hand, and in it appeared the knife from the illustration. Evelyn shook her head, backing away, but the shadows closed in, leaving her no escape. Her screams echoed through the mansion, rising above the storm. Then there was silence. When the sun rose, the storm had passed, but Marrow House remained dark and still. Its windows reflected nothing, its walls emanating a cold that kept the curious at bay. Evelyn was never seen again, and the mansion's legacy of terror lived on, whispered among those who dared speak its name. And deep within, the house waited, hungering for its next victim. The next story, dream or reality, it all started when I came to visit my grandma and grandpa in the village during the summer holidays. I don't know about the others, but I really enjoyed spending time with them. No worries, no responsibilities, live and enjoy. In the morning you can go fishing with your grandfather, play with the kids during the day, watch my favorite cartoons on the old TV in the evening. The only thing that made me uncomfortable were my dreams. They started last summer, when I came to the village. For the entire 2 months that I was there, I only had nightmares, with the same character. An old granny, with a couple of hairs on her head, all twisted up, with a thick stick on which she always leaned. She was dressed in torn rags. This image haunted me all summer. But with the onset of the day, the dreams were forgotten and I also spent the summer day carefree, but with the onset of night, she again, this summer, everything became much worse. If before I saw dreams somewhere from the side, and simply observed what was happening, then this summer, the dreams were with my participation. Over and over again, the same dream. I sleep on my small bed, the moon is shining in my face through the window, crickets are buzzing outside. And then she appears. First, she stares at me with her white eyes in one window, then she climbs into the other window and starts reaching out with her bony, hairy hands. I can't move from fear, and I can't even scream. Morning comes, I wake up in a cold sweat, check the windows, and I start to let go. That night my dream repeated itself. I was also sleeping in bed, when I saw the eyes in the window again. Strangely, I was aware of myself, I could control myself, I did not scream, because I knew or thought that it was a dream. I knew that now she would climb into the window and I would wake up again, and here it begins. She stretches out her bony, wrinkled hands and grabs my leg. Here I already began to scream. I have never seen this dream so far. She begins to drag me. I cling to everything I can, call for help from my grandmother. Grandfather, no one hears me. My hands are already on the windowsill, my nails are digging into the wood, but this creature is much stronger than a child. She pulled me out and began to drag me through the yard into the garden. Then I heard our door to the house open. Did my grandmother and grandfather really hear me? Suddenly something squealed. It seemed to me that this squeal went around the entire planet several times. From the loud scream I lost consciousness. Through the clouding I saw my grandmother and grandfather running, but it was not them. The face was theirs, but they themselves, they looked like healthy angels who were gradually turning back into people. I woke up in my bed. My grandparents were already bustling about the house. Everything was fine. I got up and went to get my clothes, which were hanging on a chair near the window. I was shaking. There were marks from my nails on the windowsill. I looked at my hands, there were bruises on my nails. It was all very strange to me. All day I wondered. Was it a dream? Or was it all in reality? Grandma called me into the kitchen to eat. At breakfast I started looking at Grandma. It seemed to me that she saw it. I quickly removed my eyes and started eating. When I went outside everything was the same. Grandpa was still making something in the barn. Affectionate cat Felix was enjoying the sun, and there was morning birds singing all around. I went to the place from my dream. There was crushed grass there. It was definitely not a dream. Already in the evening, at dinner, I decided not to sleep all night. More precisely, to pretend that I was sleeping, but in reality just close my eyes. Our lights out was at 10 p.m., the clock beeped every hour. so I decided to tell the time. Somewhere around 2:30, I felt a gaze on me. I understood that now everything was about to begin. I opened my eyes sharply. But instead of that same old woman in the window, in front of me stood my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother and grandfather. They were not angels, like last time. They were terrible, dark, and horned. Are you trying to deceive us, Maximka? The old woman said in a squeaky voice. You can't fool the old devils, her grandfather added. They both burst out laughing. I was terribly scared. I didn't know what to do in this situation. In the window I saw those same white eyes. It was the old woman who always wanted to take me away. She broke the window and attacked the old woman, started biting her neck. My grandfather, or rather the devil, with my grandfather's face, started pushing the old woman away from his beloved, but his attempts were countable. Having finished with the grandmother, the old woman attacked the grandfather. Having dealt with them, she took me by the legs and dragged me towards the garden. Carefully laying me on the grass, she fixed my hair and flew away. I didn't know what to do. What was all this? Who are my grandfather and grandmother? Who is this old woman? Without strength, I just burst into tears and sat like that until dawn. Rumors fly fast. Especially if they involve a love triangle, gender, drug use, and the murder of a family member. All of this is commonplace, it happens everywhere, but has anyone ever heard of African shamans performing voodoo rituals in a cemetery in the Russian hinterland? It's absurd, of course, but such a crazy rumor spread like hotcakes around our village. Who would have thought that such a thing was possible? Inexplicable, but true. Has anyone seen them in real life? Do they really exist? The village eavesdropping site on one well-known social network is full of various videos of eyewitnesses from the cemetery, where those same shamans from Africa are allegedly captured. Most of it is outright nonsense and staged. But there are a couple of videos that at least somehow pull off evidence. It would not be difficult to hire a few blacks in the city, bring them to the village, dress them up as aborigines and let them into the cemetery in the middle of the night, but still, why not? Suddenly, in fact, aborigines live in the cemetery, appearing out of nowhere. When they first appeared, or rather, rumors about the natives, they whispered that the dead began to walk. At night they rose from their graves and wandered around the cemetery, some even went out into the village. Many videos and photos with the participation of walking corpses can be found in the eavesdropping of our village. There are also quite a variety of productions. But you can find something interesting. Living witnesses are present, but who will believe the elderly? And so, for the sake of interest, I decided to find out a little about what is happening in the cemetery of our village. Taking a couple of friends, Oleg and Maxim, we headed to our mystical place in the evening. Just in case, I took a hatchet with me, in case I had to defend myself. Oleg also took a weapon with him, a small homemade club with nails. Maxim did not take anything, relying on us. He is weak, it is unlikely that he will cope, but he knows how to hide well. If something terrible happens, and Oleg and I have to fall in battle, Maxim will definitely survive, and then tell everyone about us. Whether they will believe it or not, it is unknown. At least they will be interested in the disappearance of our persons. Once at the cemetery, we found a secluded place to wait for the night. It was getting dark, the darkness was gradually enveloping us, and the coolness made us pretend to be wild aborigines. It's all nothing, scientific interest is above all. The moon was high in the night sky, brightly illuminating the ominous cemetery. It had been a long time since we had sent here, and we had not seen anything like this. We do not intend to give up yet. Until the morning comes, we will still guard the cemetery. Our expectations were eventually justified. We heard awkward singing in an incomprehensible language and loud stomping. As if someone had really decided to hold a ritual. The three of us headed towards the source of the noise. Oleg and I took out the weapon. We tried not to make unnecessary sounds, it was scary after all. Whoever it was, they were clearly crazy people if they decided to hang out in a cemetery. Ahead of us appeared the glimmer of a fire, and shadows moving in an incomprehensible dance. Coming a little closer, the following scene opened up before us. Several black aborigines were spinning around the fire, singing something in their language. Next to them stood several living dead, some of them were still fresh, seemed like ordinary people, the rest were rotting, with maggots inside. But they stood steadfastly and watched the savages. We became witnesses to the confirmation of the tale about our cemetery, but what now? The only thing left to do was to quietly leave. Just as we were about to turn back, Maxim suddenly gave away our location. It was a bad idea to take him, he knows how to hide well, physically he is in bad shape, he couldn't hold back when they were turning in single file and rolled right up to the fire. The natives noticed Max and immediately grabbed their spears. Guys! Help! Was the last thing we heard before Maxim was stabbed. Under the dying cries of a friend, Oleg and I had to abandon each other. Fear overcame courage. The two of us headed out of the cemetery while those savages were shouting something. If only everything were so easy. A chase immediately began after us. And the worst thing is that those walking zombies were chasing us. Picking up the pace, we rushed forward, and only forward. Literally jumping over graves, just to break away from the undead pursuers. Oleg fell behind me. Out of nowhere, one of the living dead jumped on him. He tried to fight, but his strength was not equal. I continued to run, enduring the pain in my lungs, saving my skin above all else. Then they caught me, completely exhausted, tripped over something and fell, right at the feet of the dead. With their slimy, hard hands they grabbed me and dragged me back to the savages. I tried to resist, too weak for such a thing. I found myself again near the fire. The savages surrounded me, examining and feeling me. The corpses of my friends lay near the fire, their bellies ripped open, all their entrails burning in the fire. Their lifeless eyes looked at me, their heads were impaled on spears, their blood trickled in thin streams onto clay bowls. Was I going to die in a similar way? The next story, the bus doors closed behind me with difficulty. An empty bus stop, except for two bearded men, already blue from drinking alcohol. A light cold wind walked along the street, dispersing the smell of rain. The night darkness had long since enveloped everything around. Here it is, autumn. The real thing. To be honest, I like this time of year, when it is damp and cold. There is something special about it. So to speak, magical and melancholic. And now, returning home from a friend, I will enjoy a short walk. Especially since I need to air out the alcohol. We drank too much, and I am not much different from those alcoholics sitting near the bus stop. If only an adequate behavior and at least some stability on my feet. After standing there for a minute, I finally moved. There was a strange lightness in my head, which made it seem like everything around me was wrong, not real. I need to drink less, degradation is in full swing. With a flying gait, humming to myself, I strolled along the way home, looking around. From time to time I glanced at the sky, where the stars and the moon were shining. The silence of the courtyards, the rare flashes of car headlights. Yes, there is beauty in this. And only when you are drunk do you encounter such beauty. Everything would be fine, I was walking, when suddenly I heard a voice. Quiet, weak. Most likely an old woman's. I looked around, listened. The voice was coming from the direction of the garbage bins. I noticed some scurrying there. Someone, help, what happened? I asked casually. Oh, grandson, I fell. Now I can't get up. Help me, I beg you. Something seemed strange to me in all this. Especially the way the old lady spoke. Somehow guttural, or something, and while sitting in a barrel. But I didn't want to pay attention, because in old age this happens. So without further hesitation I went to help the grandmother. She, in turn, stretched out her hands. I tried to get a better look at her, but apart from an old shabby coat and dirty pants I didn't see anything. Her face was so well hidden under the scarf, as if the darkness had swallowed her. Oh, thank you, grandson. Thank you, said the old woman. No, not for. I didn't have time to finish, as her palm squeezed my forearm. So tightly that I felt how the granny was squeezing my bones. Hey, granny, what's wrong? Thank you, grandson, thank you, she repeated, her voice now distorted. I tried to break free, but to no avail. The old hag had me in her grasp. Let me go. I screamed, kicking her away, but she didn't care. Then I had to act radically. With all my strength, I pushed the old woman towards the trash can. Then I somehow fought her off, hitting her against the metal surface. Her grip weakened, the hag let go of me and fell flat, like a puppet. At that moment, the hood fell back, revealing her head. And, oh God! It was not a person. An oval head with an elongated face, distorting every second, like frames, with an expression of emotions, sometimes suffering, sometimes sadness, sometimes anger. After a while, the creature stood up, revealing all of itself. A long, skinny gray body, covered in mucus, with disproportionately small limbs. Hands with long nails bent at the elbows, and instead of feet there was something like hooves. This thing was walking towards me with a crooked gait. I couldn't stand and fell backwards on the wet asphalt, backed up and leaned my back against the fence. My breathing was ragged, sweat was streaming down my forehead. With great effort, I managed to get up and run away, but it was no use. I heard the clatter of hooves behind me. I turned my head half a turn and saw this monster rushing after me at a decent speed of a car, swaying from side to side and waving its arms like wings. I couldn't hold back a scream. My legs carried me home on their own. I didn't care where I was going, I was just rushing, but then an unexpected surprise awaited me. When I ran out to the roadway, the only obstacle to my house, I stopped for a moment and looked around. And then I noticed two silhouettes standing on the other side of the road. They were hiding in the darkness, out of reach of the streetlights. They were just standing and looking at something. I was already glad that they were people. I started shouting something unintelligible at them and waving my arms, but it was a bad decision. As you probably understood, those two silhouettes were clearly not people. Personally, I realized this late, only when those things came into the light. Jumping back and almost falling, I ran in the other direction. Those monsters blocked my way home. Now I don't know where to go. I just run, just to get away from those creatures. Their slapping steps were heard behind me. They were getting closer and closer to me. My strength was leaving me, I could no longer run. Is this the end? I stopped for a moment near some residential building to catch my breath. The creatures had fallen behind, so I had time. While I was enjoying a moment of peace, I noticed a basement. In the darkness I saw that the door was slightly open. It seemed that one of the residents forgot to close it. I was damn lucky. I ran there headlong. When I found myself in the darkness of the basement, I abruptly closed the door and pressed my back against it. My lungs were burning, and my legs could no longer stand, and I fell on my butt again. There was a commotion behind the door. The creatures crowded around the door, but had no idea what to do. They cackled, mooed, thus communicating with each other. I had to hold my breath, and in general try not to make sounds until they left. After several long minutes, they dispersed. I felt like I was about to lose consciousness. My lungs were burning, my head was buzzing. I tried to hold on until the last minute, but I still sank into a dream world. I have no idea how long I slept like that. My body was aching and it was very cold. Unpleasant feelings after those events. I didn't even immediately realize that I was holed up in the basement. I cautiously left the shelter. The bright light of the sun hit my eyes. Was it all over? I couldn't believe that I had saved them from those terrible monsters. It was daytime outside, people were going about their business, cars were driving back and forth. I, dazed after the night, headed toward home. Of course, I couldn't escape the surprised looks and whispers of passers-by. My appearance clearly indicated that I had escaped from a yellow house. But I didn't care then. The most important thing was to get home. It could all be attributed to alcohol intoxication, but no way. That day I was not so drunk as to see devils in the snuff box. This incident could have been forgotten if I had not met them again on a winter evening when I went to the store for bread. After our first meeting, there were many more of them. And now it seems to me that this time I will not be lucky. The next story, who among us hasn't collected? I'm sure that everyone has collected bottle caps, chips or cards at least once. As a child, I loved collecting various stickers. I remember I even had a special album where I collected almost 1,000 different stickers over 5 years. It's a pity that I later lost it somewhere. However, several stickers still remained. They hung on the door to my room. There were a couple of stickers from cartoons and chocolate bars on it. The hockey player sticker stood out in particular. It has a rich history. It was given to me by one of my classmates in elementary school. At school, I was good friends with all the kids, but one day I got into a fight with 2 boys who were a year older than me. One day after school, they waited for me around the corner to beat me up. Luckily, my classmate Lenya was passing by. He stood up for me. Lenya had been playing hockey since childhood and rarely passed by someone else's misfortune. So he helped me out, after which we became friends. Later, it was Lenya who gave me this hockey player sticker. I remember that I gave him a return gift. I molded a puck with a stick out of plasticine. Now I'm 26, so I graduated from school almost 10 years ago. We stopped communicating with Lenya after the 5th grade. He transferred to a gymnasium then. Nevertheless, I have pleasant memories. I've long since gotten used to the stickers, so I rarely pay attention to them. Except when I want to feel nostalgic sometimes. Yes, I live alone in an apartment that I inherited from my parents. My father died a few years ago, and my mother moved into a 1-room apartment. A 2-room apartment is more important to you, son, my mother told me. When you get married and have a baby, a 2nd room won't be superfluous. True, I haven't gotten around to getting married yet. There are enough problems without it, but that's not the point. One evening I came home from work. It had been a tough day. The labor inspectorate was supposed to come to our work soon, so everyone was on edge, preparing for the inspection. Not only was I delayed an hour at work, but the bus on the way home broke down. The minibus with my number runs every half hour, so I had to stay another 30 minutes. On top of that, no one had canceled the lines at the grocery store. In short, I came home tired. Tired, as if I'd been carrying sacks of bricks all day. I didn't even want to eat, only to rest. I kicked off my shoes from the doorway and collapsed on the bed. the pleasant moments of enjoyment were interrupted by some vague feeling. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt somehow uncomfortable. The main thing is that I can't understand what's wrong. The temperature in the apartment is normal, there's no draft, the neighbors aren't making noise. You know, that feeling as if you're in a place you don't like. I had that once, as a child, when my mother took me to visit a friend. I didn't like it there at all. The apartment was somehow gray, the air was stuffy, the interior of the rooms was somehow dreary and depressing. My apartment wasn't even close to my mother's friend's apartment, but something was clearly wrong here. I glanced at the door involuntarily. At first I didn't notice anything unusual, a couple of scratches, last year's calendar, peeling paint and stickers in places. That's when I noticed the hockey player sticker. The athlete's eyes had turned completely black. There were 2 dark circles. I shuddered in surprise, but tried to find a reasonable explanation for this. Perhaps this defect had appeared a long time ago. But I just hadn't paid attention to it. Probably the paint had worn off over time, and I hadn't even noticed it. Everything would be fine, but why did these black circles look like they were burned out? I racked my brains for a few minutes, but couldn't come up with anything. I was brought out of my thoughts by a phone call. Another bank was calling again, offering a favorable loan. I put my mobile phone aside and looked at my watch. It was getting on for the night. I decided not to bother my head with guesses about the sticker and began to get ready for bed. The feeling of discomfort had diminished, but I couldn't get a good night's sleep that night. The room was stuffy, even though I had opened the window. The nasty mosquitoes seemed to have decided to finish me off on someone's tip. Their squeaks irritated me all night. It's too bad I forgot to buy poison. A series of new problems awaited me at work, and I had to shove my dissatisfaction somewhere far away. It's hard for everyone right now, and pouring oil on the fire with a bad mood is definitely not worth it. Somehow I held out until the end of the day. Tomorrow is the last working day of the week, and that's the only thing that made me happy. I got home surprisingly quickly. Having quickly prepared an omelette with sausage, I quickly ate dinner and spent the rest of the evening watching TV. After tossing and turning a bit, I finally fell asleep when night fell. I dreamed of hockey. I watched with admiration how skillfully the hockey players moved on the ice. They skillfully hit the puck with their sticks, which flew first to one corner, then to the other. 3 periods passed, and the hockey match ended. The spectators from the stands began to applaud the athletes for their brilliant play. I stood up from my seat and also clapped, watching the hockey players. The blue team won, but for some reason I noticed the red team's goalie. The player took off his helmet, and my whole body shuddered. The athlete's eyes were surrounded by an incomprehensible black veil. There were a lot of spectators in the arena, but I was sure that this hockey player was looking at me. He stood calmly in one place and glared at me. I don't know how long this staring game lasted, but suddenly I heard an incomprehensible whisper. Yes, yes, in a noisy arena among dozens of people in an endless stream of noise and shouts, I heard someone whisper. Probably, this quiet voice was in my head, because next to me there were 4 guys who did not pay any attention to me at all and watched what was happening on the ice. I tried to make out at least something from the words I heard, but I understood nothing. Some kind of gibberish. Eventually, the whisper seemed to cut me from the inside, and my head began to hurt. I grabbed the handles and fell to my knees, after which I suddenly woke up in my bed. The voice was gone, and there was silence in the room. Only the rarely passing cars could be heard outside the window. I sighed heavily and stared at the ceiling. It was the second night I couldn't sleep. The dream made me remember the hockey player sticker again. I got out of bed and went to the door, turning on the light. The sticker had a hockey player on it, exactly like the one in my dream. The same 2 black circles instead of eyes. I tore the sticker off, then tore it into several pieces and threw it in the trash. Apparently, I think too much about unnecessary things, that's why I have nightmares. However, one strange thing couldn't be denied: dark circles remained on the door even after I tore off the sticker. What kind of mysticism is this? The circles didn't look like paint. They looked more like burning. The problem was that I personally hadn't done anything like that to the door. I tried to find an explanation for this yesterday. When I first noticed the strangeness with the sticker, I felt uneasy. I don't believe in all these spirits, ghosts and other nonsense, but the fact of the strange circles on the door couldn't be denied. In the end, I made myself some chamomile tea and went to bed closer to 4 a.m. I woke up a couple of hours later and was even late for work because of my bad sleep. Fortunately, my boss didn't notice, so I managed to avoid unnecessary stress. The details of the working day can be omitted, because the worst began the following night. I planned to at least sleep off and regain my strength on the weekend, but this was not destined to happen. I went to bed early and even slept peacefully for several hours, but an incomprehensible rustling made me wake up. I don't even know whether it's a gift or a curse to wake up from every sound. The first thing I did was look at my watch, 2:47. Then I looked at the window and was horrified. There was a man standing opposite my bed. However, even then I had doubts that it was really a man. Then who or what was it? How did a stranger get into my apartment? The moonlight and street lighting helped me to see the night visitor a little. It looked like a man in hockey gear. His face was hidden behind a hockey goalie mask. For a second I thought I was in a bad dream again. I pinched myself. It hurt, but the stranger hadn't disappeared. I closed my eyes and opened them again. The result was the same as before, although the night visitor had come one step closer to me. At this point I couldn't stand it any longer and, jumping up on my bed half a meter, flew out of my room like a bullet. In a few moments I reached the bathroom and locked the door. Now I faced another problem. I found myself in pitch darkness. I was ready to burst into tears from such a hopeless situation, but suddenly I remembered about the flashlight. The flashlight. A week ago I was cleaning the siphon in the bathroom and used a flashlight. I left it on the washing machine and couldn't get it into the room and put it back in its place in the closet. I immediately thanked myself for my laziness and reached for the flashlight by touch. Let there be light, I thought joyfully, pressing the button to turn on the flashlight. Now I prayed that the battery wouldn't die and leave me in the dark. I pointed the flashlight at the door and felt my heart pounding anxiously. It felt like I'd run several kilometers without a break. However, the worst was yet to come. I watched in horror as the lock on the door began to turn counterclockwise. It became clear that the night visitor had decided to get me. I grabbed the handle and the lock with all my might to keep the stranger out of the bathroom. I was also holding the flashlight. The worst thing for me was to be left alone in the complete darkness with this hockey player. I don't know how long this battle for the bathtub lasted, but at one point the door handle fell off. Refusing to participate in this fight with the otherworldly. For me, this did not go without consequences, since I leaned against the door and grabbed onto this damn handle. Because it came off, I flew backwards, hitting the back of my head on the bathtub. Before I passed out, I noticed how the door finally opened. I woke up in the morning, lying in an unnatural position on cold tiles in a small pool of blood. I grabbed the back of my head and cried out in pain. I hit myself pretty hard, but most of all I was glad that I was alive at all. I carefully looked out from behind the door. There was no one in the apartment, and the bright rays of the sun and the morning time acted as a guarantee of safety for me. I decided to treat the wound and went out into the corridor, heading for the first aid kit. I noticed small indentations and cuts on the linoleum. It felt as if they were left there by someone who wore skates. At least now I had no doubt that the night visitor was real. However, who he was and what he wanted remained a mystery. I took a short break and tried to think it all over and put the facts together. I realized that it all started with the sticker. Probably, the whole point is not in it, but in the hockey player who is depicted on it. Now I realize that I tore it off at the wrong time. Fortunately, I did not take the trash out into the street, because there was almost none. It was not easy to collect the sticker piece by piece, but I still managed. At least then I learned the hockey player's name. Let's call him Alexander. It's great that we live in the digital age, and if not everything, then a lot can be found on the internet. So I was able to quickly collect information about the hockey player from the sticker. His sports career turned out to be eventful. He played hockey since childhood, and at 20 he was already participating in international competitions. He had to play with different countries, Finland, Canada, Switzerland and Japan. Victories were not always, but Alexander did not lose heart, and each game gave him practical experience. However, in one of the matches he received a serious truth, which put an end to his further participation in hockey games. What shocked me more was that one of the sources reported that he had died a week ago. Although the reason was not specified. This puzzled me. Alexander was only 41 years old, at that age the whole life is ahead of him. At least the death of the hockey player explained the events that had happened a few days earlier. Now I had no doubt that the night visitor was Alexander, or rather his ghost. Whether you like it or not, after this it will be difficult not to believe in otherworldly forces. I also guessed that the sticker and the black circles on it were some kind of harbinger before all this fuss. I couldn't figure out what exactly the ghost wanted from me. I decided to dig deeper and found Alexander's page on social networks. An unremarkable account. There are a few photos, including in hockey gear. A couple of reposts from sports communities, and under the very last post about hockey there were several comments like, "May the earth rest in peace, my friend," and "Sleep well, Sonia." There are no former athletes. At least it became clear that the news about the hockey player's death was true, and not someone's evil joke or fake. Finally, I checked Alexander's friends list. I even found his mother there. I thought she could help me somehow, so I wrote to her. I introduced myself as Alexander's friend and decided to ask a little about him. Then details emerged that I didn't know. It turns out that Alexander was indeed a successful hockey player, as I had read earlier. However, then a black streak in his life seemed to decide to strangle the man. A sports injury was the starting point. After it, other health problems appeared in life, but the final verdict was oncology. Yes, this also happens. A person has been working on his body all his life, taking care of his health, and fate gives him such a terrible verdict. A topic that one can think about forever. According to the woman, before his death, Alexander was carried away in this direction, and through terrible pain he wrote several dozen pages of his thoughts on this issue. However, the man was most infuriated by something else, namely, that people only see the tip of the iceberg called success. After the injury, both the coaches and the judges, as well as his teammates, forgot about him rather quickly. The cruel reality is that today you are in the spotlight, your photo and name are on collectible stickers, and tomorrow you are used material. Before the hockey player's death, no one visited or cared about his condition, and only his mother became the person who saw him off to the end, giving him the last rays of kindness and love. Only later did the woman receive condolences from several people, and after the funeral, Alexander received sympathetic comments on social networks from 3 of his most loyal friends. I felt very sorry for Alexander and his mother after this story. I was ready to sink into depression myself from such injustice, but the woman asked me to go to church and light a candle for the peace of her son. I think my Sashenka just can't calm down, the hockey player's mother explained. We need to light a candle for him and remember something good about him, then he'll leave this world with a calm soul. I initially thought about telling the woman about the strange events in my life over the past few days, but I decided against it. I didn't want to seem crazy, and I didn't want to just push a sore spot. I'm not particularly religious, but I still decided to follow the woman's advice. I went to church, lit a candle for the hockey player, and mentally thanked him for the pleasant connection with the past. I was not eager to spend another night at home, so I decided to rent a room in an inexpensive hotel. Closer to 11 p.m., I checked into the room and took a shower. I expected new surprises that night, but to my surprise, everything went as smoothly as possible. I did not hear strange noises, the ghost did not come to me again, the stuffiness and insects did not prevent me from sleeping. I stayed in the room until 12 noon, when the maid came and asked me to check out. I reluctantly headed home. When I entered the apartment, I immediately noticed the linoleum. The skate marks were gone, as if they had never been there. The door handle was also as good as new, as if I had never opened it. Miracles, and nothing more. I walked into the kitchen and was startled to see a note on the table. It read, "Thank you for praying for me. Forgive me for persecuting you. I will not bother you again. Goodbye. Sincerely, Alexander." I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. I felt calm, but I decided to get rid of the note to forget the whole nightmare of the previous days. Finally, I entered the room and saw that only cracked paint remained in place of the sticker, and the dark circles disappeared. Exhaling, I lay down on the sofa, trying not to think about anything. About an hour after returning home, I went about my business and prepared for the next day's work. I felt comfortable in my own apartment again, and I could return to my normal rhythm of life. Although I still had some concerns, they turned out to be in vain. The night passed calmly and without incident. The next one too, a month later. I almost didn't remember the night meeting with the hockey player, but I learned a small lesson from this story. Now I try to be more attentive to other people's problems, because you never know how dire the consequences of indifference to other people's troubles can be. After all, already in childhood, Lenya showed and proved to me that it is worth being kinder and more attentive to people. Now I will definitely not forget this, and I advise others to remember such simple truths.